The Biden administration created the Disinformation Governance Board, which drew immediate backlash and comparisons to the Ministry of Truth from George Orwell's book 1984. Well, yesterday, it announced it will pause the Disinformation Governance Board. Here's what White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre had to say about it.
The Department of Homeland Security, they began their statement repeating that the board had been intentionally mischaracterized, which is a little bit of what you were asking me, and they were explicit about what it does and does not do.
Joining me now to discuss all of it is Libby Emmons, who has been covering this story as editor-in-chief of the Post Millennial. Libby, good to have you.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
It's good to see you. You heard those comments there from Karine. Do we still have you? There we go.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No trouble at all. You heard those comments there from Karine Jean-Pierre. Is the Disinformation Board the latest victim of disinformation?
I thought that was actually pretty hysterical. Peter Doocy asked that question in the press conference yesterday, if the Disinformation Board had been a victim of disinformation itself. And I think to a certain extent, they may believe that it has been. I think what really happened is that people were pretty aware of what the Disinformation Board was about. With a name like Disinformation Board, it's kind of hard to even get that wrong. It was pretty clear what the head of the Disinformation Board was about. She had spread disinformation herself. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Well, and to your point there, it's curious, what did the Biden administration expect when you create a board, you call it the Disinformation Board? I assume somebody in the administration is aware of George Orwell, 1984, that people would very quickly make these connections. Did they really expect the American public to respond positively to this?
I think that there's a good chance they expected the American public to not respond at all. But then again, it did take them 6 months of research to come up with the term ultra MAGA, which they then used to slam Trump supporters. So I'm not sure that their branding arm of the Biden administration is really doing its job. I do think it's interesting that the Disinformation Governance Board, as they called it, was initially created in the Department of Homeland Security in order to try and dispel misinformation and disinformation among migrants who may be illegally trying to cross the border before they got to the point where they were attempting to cross the border. However, the Biden administration themselves were the ones who were spreading that misinformation among migrants in the first place. So they had to create a board to tell migrants not to come across the border after telling migrants to definitely come across the border.
Now, Nina Jankowicz seems to be a big part of this story. She was being referred to as the truth czar. She was supposed to head this board, right? She has recently resigned in all of this, and she was a highly controversial figure. We don't have time to get into everything that's on the internet that she has done that's interesting. How much of this pause and in the early backlash was a response to her specifically or against the Disinformation Board, the idea of it generally?
It's pretty interesting what you say. There's not enough time to get into all the things that she has said on the internet. There have been so many things that she has said on the internet. And yeah, probably there's not time. But I think there was a big part of the reaction against this board was against Ms. Jankowicz herself, who had peddled the idea that Hunter Biden's laptop that was reported on by the New York Post was Russian disinformation. She called it a fairy tale. It was actually after it turned out that she had been named on this board. Jack Posobiec at Human Events had dug through all of her tweets and was just like, who is this person who is supposedly going to tell the world what disinformation is when she can't even figure that out herself? She had disinformation herself about COVID, Hunter Biden, elections. She claimed that there was that censorship was not the opposite of free speech. It was sort of shocking to see all of this. And I think there's also reaction against the Department of Homeland Security and the Biden administration in general for continuing to go after, the notion of domestic terrorism and all of this while continuously refusing to tackle the real issues that are confronting Americans today.
Yeah, and I do wonder if this isn't going to be a repackaging, if they're not going to bring somebody in who is more acceptable to the public, because yesterday in her comments announcing the pause, Karine Jean-Pierre, she did indicate that they were not done with the ultimate goal of this board. Let's play clip 4.
Yes, the board is pausing in the sense that it will not convene while former Secretary Chertoff and former Deputy AG Gorlick do their assessment. But the departments work across several administrations to address disinformation that threatens the security of our country is critical, and that will indeed continue.
Libby, what is the work that will continue, do you think?
I think they are going to continue to try and tell the American public what to think and what to think about. They're going to continue to try and tell us that there's no problem at the border, that that's just disinformation. They're going to continue to tell us that there's no influence peddling going on in the Biden administration or with his son over all of these years. They're going to continue to tell us that that's some sort of fairy tale of disinformation. I think that's really the goal here is for them to try and ensure that Americans are thinking what the Biden administration wants them to think. And perhaps this pause is to try and get their messaging back on track. Maybe they'll bring in some TikTokers who clearly have all the insights on Ukraine and border security. Perhaps they'll go after some other social media influencers and really nail down their message. One can only hope.
Now, Libby, the truth is everyone on both sides of the political aisle understand that disinformation does exist. There is bad information in the world. In your judgment, does the government have any role to play in determining what's good information and what's bad information?
I think in this case, we have seen primarily this administration give us bad information over and over. It was shortly after President Biden was inaugurated that Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas came out during a press conference with Jen Psaki at the time and said, we're not telling immigrants not to come, we're telling them not to come now. And then it has been months upon months of them trying to say that they are not encouraging migrants to come across the border, when in fact, interviews repeatedly with migrants who are, dumping their passports because they're not refugees, they just want to come here, which, God bless them. We hear in interviews with people, they're saying, well, Biden said we could come.
Libby?
We're coming because Biden said we could come.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we greatly appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll do it again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.